BYU spring game is in the books. How did they do? How did they look? And only one major injury on the alumni side of the football game.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Always appreciate you guys being a part of the show. Very proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The motto is your team every day, and as such, this is your only daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Diving right in on today's show, a number of you, I would figure between 5,000 and 6,000 of you, brave the elements. Pretty cold weather outside. Really, the only thing in terms of being outside at LaVell Edwards Stadium on Friday afternoon and evening for BYU's annual spring showcase and also the alumni game. Now, BYU actually scrimmaged more than I thought they were going to. Based on what I understood, was around like about 70 plays for BYU in that scrimmage. And there were a few players that stood out to me, and we'll talk about those guys here in a moment. But you want to say best wishes, first things first, to Max Hall in the alumni game as part of the nightcap. He ruptured his Achilles tendon. To his credit, though, he stayed out there on the field and was signing autographs and taking pictures with fans after the game. That was pretty impressive, considering that's a pretty serious injury. But nonetheless, best wishes to BYU's all-time winningest quarterback. Yes, Max still does have the most wins as a quarterback in BYU football history, and best wishes to him on a quick recovery. All right, let's get to what I took away from BYU's actual scrimmage, the team practicing. I got to the stadium right as they were doing the tail end of their warm-ups, going through special teams drills. And I got to say, in terms of the overall takeaways from this, is that I think it's very clear that BYU is fully intent that Keaton Slovis is going to be their starting quarterback. He wore the green jersey, the only quarterback that was not live during the scrimmage portion. The first string offense also was only thud. They essentially one-hand or two-hand touch with the defense. But I have to say, BYU's defensive line was very impressive to me in this game. And they've been pretty impressive, I'm not going to lie. In all the media observation windows we have been given so far this spring, I've been impressed with what BYU's defensive line has brought. Is it a matter of they got an opportunity now to make more plays in the backfield? Are they able to focus on one thing rather than have the two gap and have multiple responsibilities to hold up opposing offensive linemen? I don't know necessarily what the reasoning is for it, but early on and also throughout the entirety of camp to this point, because we're now 4/5 the way done, there's only 3 practices remaining, and those will be taking place next week. BYU will only be conditioning as a team this week. I think the coaches wanted to spend some downtime with their family. It is Alpine School District where BYU is located, and I think also Nebo School District, probably also Provo School District for that matter. It is their spring break, and I think wanted to spend some downtime and also be able to kind of evaluate where things stand as they go into their final week of drills. But nonetheless, that defensive line, very, very impressive to me. Now, are they going to be elite? Are they going to be world beaters when they get out there against opposing teams like in Arkansas 3 games into the season after you beat up on 2, in theory, you beat up on 2 buttercups in both San Houston State and Southern Utah? Well, only time will tell. But right now, this BYU defensive line has been really, really impressive, especially going up against a revamped BYU offensive line. Now, that's the other thing that could be in play here is BYU continues to shuffle a lot of guys along that offensive front. I saw Tyler Little play no less than 3 different positions on that offensive line for BYU. He landed at both guard spots and also saw some time at left tackle in this game. And that means that there are a number of guys, and the question was asked, and actually, I think I may have asked it to Aaron Roderick. He said that a lot of this is cross-training, getting guys ready in case injury strikes. They have some experience in some of these different positions that they can be moved into those spots. Do I expect BYU to settle on a 5 to 7 man rotation? No, they have 5 men, period. Do I expect them to settle on a 7 or 8 man rotation at the offensive line early on in training camp? Yes, I do. And I think this spring period is probably giving them an idea of, okay, who are the top 10 contenders here along that offensive front? I think it's very clear that Kingsley Suamataia will be BYU's left tackle. Connor Pay, unless Paul Maile shows up and just absolutely spectacular at center. I would expect that Connor Pay reprises his role as BYU starting center this fall, leaving 3 other positions open for guys to make a move up the depth chart and at least hopefully solidify their spot. That's at left and right guard and also at right tackle. And I think there are no shortage of options for BYU there, but maybe that's part of the reason why this defensive line looks so good. Now, in terms of players individually that stood out to me, I actually am intrigued by what Ryder Burton showed. I know that he was competing with the 3rd and the 4th stringers out there, but he showed a live arm, showed some moxie, some poise out there. I think he is a guy that was held back more in high school by his offensive system than anything else that you can really point to. BYU never wavered. Once they offered him and received his commitment, they never wavered in looking at other quarterbacks at the high school level. Yes, they did bring in Jake Retzloff from the junior college ranks. They did bring in Keaton Slovis from the graduate transfer ranks out of the transfer portal, but they did not look at other high school quarterbacks so far as that I am aware. And that screams to me, they really believe that Ryder Burton is capable of being a contender for that job down the road at BYU. Does he need to bulk up? Does he need to have some more seasoning? Yes, absolutely. But he showed flashes of what he could do. Also got to give big ups to Nick Billups. He maybe had the play of the game, if you want to call it that, for his trucking of Ty Burke on a touchdown run. It was like 20 plus yards. I was standing in the end zone. If you watch the replay, I'm standing right there on the kind of the end line at the back of the end zone, and he ran right past me as he was celebrating. What a crazy play. Billups, to me, is still going to be a guy who's going to be a depth piece at the very best for BYU in his career, but he's been a very, very capable scout team quarterback for BYU and had a really nice moment there. Other guys who stood out to me would include Nukuluve Helu. He was also similar to Ryder Burton, getting time with the 3rd and 4th stringers, but had 6 carries for 56 yards. It's not a bad total for him. I think that he has proven that he is going to be a factor in the running back race down the road for BYU. Keaton Slovis, for his play, was 6 of 13, 50 yards, 1 interception. I do have to give a shout out to Jacob Robinson. The pass that he intercepted was a fantastic read from Jacob Robinson, but Keaton Slovis nearly completed that pass. It was inch perfect execution in terms of what Jacob Robinson did to pick that pass off. Was it a little bit of a questionable decision by Keaton Slovis to sling it? Maybe so, but I still thought he was very, very good. I think Jake Retzloff continues to be BYU's number 2 option. I like Cade Fennegan as a person. Trust me, I really like him as a kid, but I thought Jake Retzloff performed much better in this, and the stats indicate as such. 7 of 10, 69 yards and 1 touchdown. Fennegan had just 4 yards passing in this scrimmage. Now, it could be a one-off. You look at it and say, okay, what is it really? But I really was impressed with Retzloff. Similar to Ryder Burton, he probably needs to bulk up a little bit to really be the guy for BYU, maybe add on some weight. But what he has is the ability to stay in the pocket and stare things down and make big plays. Also, Ice Moa, if I'm not mistaken, it was Retzloff that, if you remember watching, it was kind of a slingshot maneuver, like came up and just kind of grabbed him around the chest and just dragged him to the ground, jumping through the air. Ice Moa is going to be a really nice defensive lineman for BYU. I think he is a fantastic player, and that was a fantastic individual play for him. Also, Nisa Mahe had at least 1 sack and 1 PBU pass breakup for BYU in that game, and he continues to stand out. I said this last week on the podcast. I believe that I've been told by multiple people that in terms of defensive linemen that were already on the roster coming out of last season into this season that have impressed the most, Nisa Mahe is among them, if not the most impressive of the group. For whatever reason, he has really taken to this defense, and it's given him an opportunity to go out and show what he is capable of doing for BYU. Does that mean he's going to be an all-conference caliber defensive lineman? No, it's still just very much a spring ball period, but he's been very impressive in what we have been able to see as a media corps and the conversations I've had with folks who have watched pretty much all of the practices at this point across the board, and they've been really impressed by what he has shown. So I think that overall there were some really good standout performances from the scrimmage, a lot of tape for coaches to dissect this week and going on into the offseason. And I do think that at this point, Jay Hill kind of talked about it, there's still opportunities for guys to move up and down the depth chart. But at this point, I feel like they're probably going to come out of spring with a pretty good idea of their 2 deep. Speaking of BYU, as they go into summer conditioning, player run practices, and obviously get ready for training camp in August. But I think that this has been a very, productive spring period for BYU, and it's given them a really good look at what they have in store for the guys on the roster. Now, I'm going to continue to reiterate this point, though. it is still spring ball. There's a lot of guys trying new positions. There's a lot of guys getting new looks at different things. There's a lot of experimentation with play calls and the like. But the bigger point is, I think that BYU, especially along that defense, has gotten a really good look, hopefully, at a bevy of different guys on that defense. And they have an idea, okay, that guy's probably slated for a redshirt. That guy's probably slated for the scout team. And then hopefully they have kind of delineated, okay, that's a first string or at least a rotation piece that'll be on the depth chart for BYU. That's the hope as they come out of spring ball, that they have kind of narrowed that down and dug into that some more. Will it ultimately pan out that way, and will we be given a actual post-spring practice depth chart? Only time will tell, but I'll probably do my best at some point here. If they don't give it to us, once spring ball actually wraps up, based on my conversations with folks and that type of stuff, I'll try and get you guys the best guess I possibly can give you in terms of the depth chart if they don't provide us with one. Speaking of BYU sports information, it's TBD if they will do that, and obviously that'll be on the coaches to authorize the SIDs to hand that out, but we'll have to kind of wait and see on that front. All right, coming up next, we're going to flip over to BYU basketball just for a moment. The Cougars obviously are looking for options in the transfer portal. One big piece potentially coming in has already set an official visit date. We'll talk about that, and we'll also catch up on all the other news in BYU sports from the weekend that was, as well as a look at the opener for the 2015 season, a pretty memorable game. For those of you who remember that one, we'll get to all of that coming up in mere moments. First, a word on our friends over at Built Bar. Of course, Built Bar has been working with us for months, my friends, and we absolutely love this company. If you have not had a Built Bar, you are missing out. They are truly the best tasting protein bars on the market. And the best part is, I don't know how Built does it. These bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. It's even better, they're healthy. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. Think about that, guys. It's absolutely incredible. The best part is every single one of these bars is covered in 100% real chocolate. You will not believe how good they taste versus how healthy they are for you. So head to your local Smith's and or Sam's Club today to pick up your boxes if you need them right now from our friends at Built Bar. You still obviously can go online to built.com. Place your order there. They obviously have the promo code still going on at built.com, locked on 15 for 15% off your order. That's LOCKEDON for 15% off your order. But if you need your bars right now in a bad way, you're got hankering for me, you cannot wait. Get to your local Smith's and or Sam's Club today and pick them up right away. That's our friends over at Built Bar. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. I want to encourage you guys now to make your second listen, our friends over the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Josh Neighbors does a great job all year long and just covering everything from Big 12 football to Big 12 basketball, the realignment saga from the Big 12 perspective. He has got it all covered for you guys. Check that out wherever you get your podcasts. It's available on YouTube. And like I said, wherever you podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, you guys know the drill, but check that out. It's Locked On Big 12. All right, continuing on here with BYU. As they continue to look around on the BYU basketball side of things, BYU is trying to find some difference makers for their front line. I think they understand, at least based on what I'm perceiving, is that they have nice pieces, but they don't have standout pieces on the front court. And I've said this once, I'll say it again. I want to see BYU get a true big man that can come in and patrol the middle and allow a guy like Fousseyni Traore and or Aly Khalifa to make more of their opportunities in the low post against some what I'd like to say, more right-sized players, or I guess more same-sized players. That's probably the best way to say it. I don't want to see Tiki having to go up against guys who are 7'1", 7'2". I also don't want to see a guy like Foose have as a 6'6" guy who does have a 7'1" wingspan, but his ability to get overwhelmed by guys who are significantly taller than him, we're talking like 6'10", 6'11", it's disadvantageous for a guy like that. But BYU is getting a potential impact guy on campus this coming weekend per Vanquish the Foe. Robbie McCombs still doing absolutely incredible work on the BYU basketball front, saying that Aly Khalifa will be making an official visit to BYU this coming weekend from April 7th to the 9th. Khalifa is listed at 6'11", 230 pounds. Most recently has played for the Charlotte 49ers. One of the top players for the 49ers this past year. They actually won the CBI, if you weren't paying attention, averaging 11.7 points, 6.3 rebounds, and 2.7 assists on 51% shooting. But the best number here 38% shooting from three. This is a big man who can step out to the perimeter and stroke it, it appears. He was 48 of 126 from three on the season. So this is not a guy who shot like 10 threes and hit 5 of them. That's not what, 4 of them, excuse me. He has been able to prove that he can shoot the long ball at a high clip. The biggest thing is he's got 2 years of eligibility. This is not a guy who is like a Rudy Williams or bringing him just for a 1-year rental. He'd come in and play for ostensibly 2 more seasons. He has international experience. He is a native of Alexandria, Egypt, has played for the Egyptian national team, U17s, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm actually really intrigued by this. I've said it before. I want to see BYU get a true big man out there that can just be that anchor for BYU in the middle. Khalifa, the defensive metrics maybe aren't necessarily where I'd like him to be, but what he has is size that BYU does not have on the roster. 6'11", 230. That doesn't exist with a guy like Aly Khalifa. Foose is 250, 260 pounds, but he's packed it onto a 6'6" frame. You can't teach length and height. A guy that like what Ali I'm screwing this up here, but nonetheless, what a guy like Aly Khalifa has, he has that size, and that's the thing I want to see BYU get. I would say my priority number 1 for BYU basketball during this transfer portal period is to get size on the interior. The biggest thing in the Big 12 for BYU, I think it's going to absolutely surprise them, is that they're going to go up against even bigger teams than they've already faced. Yes, Gonzaga has been a very, very long and lengthy team that BYU's gone up against during their time in the West Coast Conference. Same thing with St. Mary's at different points. But outside of that, how many other rosters in the WCC have really tested BYU with their length and height? Maybe every so often a Santa Clara potentially, or a Pepperdine, but that seems like it's a one-off. This is going to be an every game proposal for BYU. Bob Huggins, I don't know if you guys saw this. I just came to my mind. I probably should have talked about this earlier. He was asked by the Phil the 68 podcast about what he expects for the new schools coming in. He said, I feel bad for all of them. Bob Huggins knows what they're going up against. This is a guy, he mentioned, I've coached at so many different levels at so many different schools. We are playing in the best conference, he's speaking of his West Virginia Mountaineers, in college basketball. And he says the BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF, they're going to absolutely get it handed to them on an every night basis. Is there a chance that one of them, most notably probably Houston, is able to hold up night in and night out? Yes, I would believe so. But it is going to require a lot of BYU to be ready for the rigors of the Big 12. I don't expect BYU, frankly, to be all that competitive year 1 in basketball. It seems like too much to ask of them to do that. Can they pick off a win here and there? And could they finish maybe in the 10 to 12 range in a 14-team Big 12? I think that'd be a pretty good accomplishment for BYU. Heck, if they even get to 500 in conference season, I'd hang a banner if I'm BYU. I'm that just wary of how much BYU's got coming to them in the Big 12 era. But getting back to my original point, they need to have elite size on the interior to protect that rim. These Big 12 teams, they are very, very good. They know what they are doing. They have established styles of play, and they'll beat you up. And you need to have guys who can hold up on the interior. Something that BYU, I thought, got exposed this past year was the lack of depth on the interior. Aly Khalifa and Foose are very, very fine players. Let me reiterate that. But after that, well, I remember even who the guy was. He was a walk-on that they went to. His name's skipping my mind. He was a 6'7" walk-on that was called upon to be BYU's third big man. That can't be the case in the Big 12. I also think the other thing BYU needs to focus on is finding another perimeter ball handler that can help Dallin Hall out along the perimeter for BYU and distribute the basketball and hopefully shoot it from 3 at a high clip. That would be my 2 priorities for BYU. But priority number 1 for me, far and away, is a guy like Aly Khalifa. You need big men to come in and bolster BYU's interior depth. If you don't do that, I'm saying it's going to be a long winter in Provo, watching BYU basketball potentially just get roughed up night in and night out by their opponents in the Big 12 conference. But hey, that's I guess the glory and the agony of all this is getting to see that ultimately play out. But I just hope that we're able to enjoy BYU basketball a little bit more than I anticipate them. Just, man, I want to be upbeat about BYU basketball, but I feel like this is going to be a really, really rough introduction to the Big 12 for BYU. All right, coming up, We will finish out this edition of the podcast looking back at the weekend that was for other BYU teams. BYU men's volleyball on a bit of a roll here. We'll talk about that. We'll also catch up on the other news involving BYU baseball, BYU softball, and like I said, also look back at all of BYU's games in the 155-game look back of BYU's run as an independent member. We kick off the 2015 season coming up in just a moment. First, a word on our friends over at Perry Homes. Of course, Perry Homes has been working with us for a few months now. Whether you're looking for your first home, you're ready to upgrade to your dream home, Perry Homes has a house for you, my friends, here in Utah. For 50 years, Perry Homes has been Utah's premier home builder with communities throughout the state. They got many communities, home designs, and price points to help meet your needs. Perry Homes has beautiful communities in Davis, Salt Lake, Tooele, and Utah counties. They also have multiple communities in in Washington County near St. George if you want to get down to the southern end of the state. They also offer over 50 unique home designs from ramblers to 2 stories to townhomes as well. They even have quick move-in homes available if you're ready to get the move on now. And the best part is they offer generous financing incentives to their preferred lenders. So if you want to learn more, visit perryhomesutah.com to see what's new at Utah's finest neighborhoods. That's perryhomesutah.com. For 50 years, for 50 years, let me get the tagline right. Utah has been coming home to Perry Homes. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, my friends. Hope you guys have had a fantastic weekend. If those of you who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I think the majority of you are. Hopefully you enjoyed General Conference. 15 new temples announced worldwide, some really cool ones. I have some dear friends from Bakersfield, California. That was really cool to see that announcement come. San Jose, California. It's just fun to see these temple announcements come and how impactful they are for the local communities around them. So congratulations to all of you who have a new temple coming your way. I happen to live in Saratoga Springs, and Saratoga Springs Open House is coming up later this spring / early summer, and looking forward to getting out and finally seeing that fine edifice at some point. All right, before we go, let's get to the actual BYU sports news here. BYU men's volleyball ranked number 7 in the country. They figure to move up after back-to-back wins over the weekend, beating USC in 4 sets, both Thursday and Friday night, winning both of those 3-1. USC was number 11 in the country, so a nice win for BYU. BYU is now 12-0 at home this season. They've won 6 straight games, 6 straight matches, I should say, for BYU volleyball. Their homestand will continue. It's a really long homestand. They'll host Stanford for a 2-match series beginning this Friday at the Smith Fieldhouse. Senior night recognitions for Heath Hughes and Mitchell Worthington will be held on Saturday following that match. Both of the matches are scheduled to start at 7 o'clock Mountain Time and will be streamed on BYU TV if you want to check those out. Hopefully they can run their home slate, or home record, I should say, to 14-0 and finish off the season in positive fashion. Now, BYU baseball sits at 9-17 on the season. They're 3-6 in West Coast Conference play, and a tough weekend up on the road for BYU as they lost the series to Gonzaga. They lost the opener 5-1, bounced back to win the middle game 6-5, but lost the rubber match 8-2. They're back in action today at noon Mountain Time, taking on Washington State over in Pullman before returning home to host San Francisco this coming weekend. Best of luck to the Cougars as they take on the Crimson Cougs this afternoon. BYU softball had a pretty good weekend, all things considered, down in Louisiana. They're now 17-9 on the season. They were down at the Purple and Gold Classic at LSU. BYU lost the opener in a narrow fashion to number 12 ranked LSU 3-2, bounced back to beat Louisiana Tech 5-3, then got run-ruled by LSU in their second matchup 10-2 before bouncing back with a 1-0 win in their finale on Saturday against NC State. BYU's back in action tomorrow to make the trek up to Pocatello, Idaho to take on Idaho State, and then they will open up West Coast Conference play this weekend at Santa Clara. So all things considered, an up and down weekend for other BYU sports, but hopefully better things are ahead as the weather gets better. That's the nice thing about this. So let's get a lot of snow here along the Wasatch Front in the next today, tomorrow, and Wednesday potentially, but looking at the longer range forecast, a week from tomorrow, I saw the forecasted high. Forecast for tomorrow, Tuesday, 35 here locally in Utah. But a week from tomorrow, it doubles to 71 degrees. Spring is almost here, and I, for one, cannot wait. I have been jonesing to get on the golf course and get the snow out of the way so I can actually go and swing the sticks. That's what I'm looking forward to. All right, final thing before we go on today's show is one of the more memorable games of BYU's independent era, and it's obviously the opener to the 2015 season. Now, Taysom Hill had returned once again from another season-ending injury for BYU, and all eyes were on BYU making their first ever trek to Nebraska, to Lincoln, to take on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Now, I made the trek to this game, had the time of my life, met up with some very dear friends of mine who had, we had all recently graduated from BYU. I was working in sports radio. I made the trek to Lincoln, said, you know what? There's no way I'm missing out on this game. And it was a really difficult game for BYU, all things considered, because Taysom Hill came out in this game and was just absolute lightning early on in this one. He finished the game 21 of 34 for 268 yards. But as many of you might recall, midway through this game, yet another devastating injury as he was scrambling. He had really proven the conversation all summer long. Many of you will recall the conversation all summer long is, can Taysom be a guy who can play from the pocket? He's an elite athlete, but he needs to learn how to be a quarterback from the pocket. And early on in this game, he was absolutely slicing and dicing the Nebraska defense. But he obviously scrambled and then has that Liz Frank injury that cost him yet another season. But then here comes the legend of Tanner Mangum. Now, obviously, we all know the Tanner Mangum story played out in different fashion than we all anticipated it being. He came in to replace Taysom Hill, went 7 of 11 for 111 yards, and obviously, the biggest touchdown of his entire career, I say that bar none, the biggest touchdown of Tanner Mangum's career came as he made the heave to the end zone, and Mitch Matthews just goes out and rebounds everybody else for that pass, catches it, and falls into the end zone. Now, I did not see that play out live. And you're probably wondering, well, you're there, Jake. How did you not see it? Well, I was sitting in the end zone where Mitch Matthews caught that pass. I was sitting on the opposite. So essentially, if you go from sideline to sideline, I was kind of sitting on the opposite sideline. And the way that Nebraska's stands are built, you actually, from where I was sitting, you could not see the end zone unless you were able to kind of lean over and see it. I did not see it, but my buddy who I was at the game with, Colton, he actually saw the play out because he was standing, he had a different angle on it, and he freaks out. He's like, he caught it. I'm like, who caught it? Who caught what? Mitch Matthews caught the touchdown pass and BYU wins. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, it was just absolutely electric. The devastation simultaneously on Nebraska's fans' faces, along with the elation of BYU fans, was absolutely just pandemonium. It went from just high to low almost immediately. There was a Nebraska fan next to me who I had a great time bantering with back and forth in that game. We were having a great time. I honestly don't remember his name, but I just know that we had a great time kind of going back and forth in this game. He went from just screaming his guts out and was just silent, shook my head and said, thank you for coming to Lincoln. Hope you've had a great time. Have a great day. And off they went. They were gone. And trust me, walking out of that stadium, there were a lot of long faces for the Cornhusker faithful, but what an incredible game for BYU. Taysom also had 9 carries for 72 yards and the 2 touchdowns on the ground. Absolutely critical role that Taysom played in this game to give BYU even the chance they had to win it, but he had another devastating injury for him in that one. But obviously Mitch Matthews, that touchdown pass will forever live on in BYU football history. It'll be replayed from here to kingdom come. Is one of those plays that's always going to be on the highlight reel for BYU. But they finished the season. They started the 2015 season in thrilling fashion, 1-0, and then they would return home for their home opener the following week. And, well, can the Mangum magic continue? Well, I'm sure it can. We'll talk about that one on tomorrow's show. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. Cannot thank you guys enough for your continued support of the show as always. It is April, my friends. We're entering more of the true off-season period here as BYU gets closer to wrapping up spring ball, but that does not mean we slow down on this podcast whatsoever. So thank you for your support as always. Hope you guys are all doing well. And of course, make sure you make your first listen to this podcast every single day. Make your second listen, our friends over the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. They're doing a great job covering all things college hoops. You want to get ready for tonight's national championship game between San Diego State and UConn. Check out Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Until tomorrow, my friends, this has been the Locked On Cougars Podcast. See ya.